when we evolve, well, we're always evolving, but we come to a place where we really begin to understand what our telomeres are, their function, how they work in the body. And, you know, science on many levels has led us to believe things that aren't true.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of the Spiritual Inspired Show. I am your host, Claudiu Murgan. My guest today is John Surgil. John, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I
Very
know
happy to be here.
I know you are a very busy person, and you run many projects and the spiritual community. And I really appreciate your time for being here. And the disclaimer, we kind of had a pre-interview a week ago, and we kind of tried to know each other and see exactly what we are going to talk about. Very interesting subject and very interesting life you had. And I would like to start by asking you, when exactly in your life, at one point, did you realize that, self-awareness and spirituality is something that you really have to look for and is more important than anything else?
Good question. I think it more found me than I found it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I always had consciousness, but I didn't have much awareness, if that makes sense to you. But I think it all came together after my near-death experience. That's when it began to unfold in my life and really begin to take hold. Everything changed after that moment in my life. So I would have to say it found me.
And you mentioned that to me that drastic moment in your life. It was like a near-death experience. And can you please recall that event for us?
Sure. Let me preface it by saying that maybe 6 to 8 months before this event happened to me, I thought maybe something was wrong with me physically. Long-term memory, short-term memory loss, confusion, almost Parkinson's, like shaking, picking up a glass and just taking it to my face. And I was very concerned. Uh, I had actually contemplated going to the doctor. I haven't been to the doctor in over 40 years, by the way. And I just, again, had a lot of anxiety around it. There were a lot of issues that came up for me, and I really didn't know what was going on. And then one afternoon, I was in my car driving to a client, and I had to pull over. I felt very strange, and I pulled my car over, and I felt weird in this moment. I thought the car was running because my legs were vibrating. And I look down and the key's not in the ignition, the car's off, but it feels like the car's on and it's vibrating. And it started at my feet and it worked its way up my body and into my sacrum, and it kept working up. And I describe it like it almost felt like quicksand in a sense. And it just kept moving up my body. And I can tell you I wasn't scared, but I knew something was happening. It was very disconcerting. It was weird. I have to just tell you, this is very strange. And it's working up my body and it kind of came up to my neck. And I also describe it at that point like drowning. And it came up and then shot through my crown and I crossed over. And the interesting thing was I didn't go to the light. I didn't see the light. I just saw space, void, this black void, this darkness. And what's really interesting is I didn't remember much of the event when I crossed over until much later. It took me almost years to identify and integrate what had happened to me. And when I came back, my reality completely changed. First off, all my symptoms were gone. I was no longer symptomatic, but everything was different. Not only could I feel energy, but I could see it. And I'm not talking about looking at someone's aura. I mean, the trees, I could see like this energy. I could feel everything. It was like I had this satori and everything was amplified around me, everything. And again, the symptoms were gone. So, to make a long story bearable, I contacted my father, who said I need to contact my aunt, who has passed since 94. And she had traveled the world after my uncle died, um, but didn't just travel the world. She traveled with this evidential medium and clairvoyant, very well known, and his wife. But she traveled to the jungles of Brazil and met with shaman priests. She went to like Tibet and met with Shaolin monks and all over the world, and then went to India and brought back this well-known psychic surgeon by the name of Brother Gregorio, and brought him back to her house, opened her house for healings, and he would do sessions, and really quite remarkable considering she was the consummate housewife raising, 7 children. And I called uh, her up and she said, you need to talk to Calvin, this clairvoyant. So I did. And when I spoke to him, it was very unusual for me. I didn't know how to relate to him. He talked very strangely to me. I introduced myself and he said, John, something's happened to you, John. And I was like, yeah, no shit, excuse my language. And he starts telling me about being a star seed and a walk-in and all this to me. And this is way over my pay grade at the time. And I'm listening and he's telling me, do you meditate, John? And, do you pray? And again, I am not really understanding where he's going with me. And he's talked to me for a little while. And at the end of the conversation, I just said to him, what's happened to me? Because I didn't, I again felt very strange. And and the next words out of his mouth were, it will all reveal itself to you, John, So I was like, great, thanks for the pearls. And don't you know, 3 days later it did. And I wound up saving a man's life and removing a tumor from an animal. Now, I'm sure your listeners are like, what is he talking about? But I had this experience where I was guided to heal this animal. And I started toning, which is an ancient modality. And I was able to focus my vocal cords and intentions into this animal. And by the time I was done, the tumor was gone. And the gentleman was going to commit suicide. He was going to shoot his dog and then shoot himself. But I intervened and did that. And I'll never forget, I got back in my car. This happened 3 days later. And I got back in my car and I said out loud, oh, okay, that's what he meant by it would all reveal itself. So that was the beginning of my journey.
Yes, beautiful. And I know you explained to me in detail the story with the dog and the owner who wanted to commit suicide. And I want to go back to a word you mentioned, walk in. Do you know right now the meaning of that word, and where are you? Are you a walk in, or something else happened to you at that time?
Well, I guess that's a matter of opinion, but interesting you say that because in the beginning, my understanding was it was another soul coming into the body, and the old soul that was there just sort of occupying till this more enlightened soul comes in. But I have since understand that it's not that for myself, because all of us, all our soul, every one of us has a piece of ourself on the other side of the veil. And basically what I connect with and understand is that it's part of my oversoul, my other part of myself, my higher consciousness coming into my body and occupying that space, that energy. Um, it's really the remembrance. That's kind of what I interface with, understand is I began to remember who I was, why I was here. I grew up with a lot of, or lack of, guidance, mentoring um, in my life. Suffered a lot, rape, torture, isolation, a lot of narratives unfolded in my life, which were all part of my curriculum, my lessons, and began to realize that all of this was happening for a reason to me. And then I realized as I ascended and garnered more consciousness, what I'm doing today, the work that we do, uh, began to become more acute, clear, focused, and I began the mission that I'm on today with our companies.
Yeah. And over the years, how did your modalities, your healing modalities, improve or transition to something else? Are they the same? How do you feel it?
Good question. Uh, I began to study, but I realized that I already knew. I'd read up on quantum physics, other applications, sciences, and realized that I already innately knew what it was. So, what I realized for myself was I needed to trust my instincts, my I am presence, trust it. I never did in my life. I never knew love, and I never knew how to receive love or knew what gratitude was. And once I began to really understand what that was, I was able to merge my divine feminine with my divine masculine. And once that happened in my life, everything changed. But I realized that when I came back, uh, I discovered that what happened to me was it was a spontaneous kundalini explosion in reverse, because usually, as I'm to know, it starts at the crown and, activation, but mine started at my root and worked its way up in about 20 seconds. Complete opening, blasting channel. And that's when I crossed over. So when I came back, I realized that I had gifts. We all do. Every single one of us has all of these abilities, but a lot of it is predicated on our timeline, our awareness, where we are in that timeline, to be activated consciousness to kind of interface with those abilities. But mine was just, like an instantaneous lesson, so to speak. And it took me, this was about 10 years ago. It took me, 7 or 8 years to finally integrate. It was a very powerful journey, but a very painful one, because it's really all about doing the inner work, the inner child, the flame of innocence, clearing cell memory, and really working on triggers, impacts, traumas, and clearing that. I've worked with a number of people whose cancer came back because, we all have markers, genetics, in pathology, and we trigger that. I mean, there are a lot of narratives that contribute to that, parasites, other narratives, but a lot of it is emotional. And we have to work on clearing those vibrations, those energies, to really ascend and create a container inside that is vibrating at a high frequency. In the context of the brighter the light, the smaller the shadow. When we keep our vibration high, we maintain a certain level of focus, health, and wellness. And I do a lot of that in my work. But what I realized I was capable of doing, because my voice is very deep and I can create this resonance, I'm able to focus and harness vibration, tone, and sound energy to kind of an acute point to target errant cells in the body to transmute cell structure. And I'm able to oscillate the nucleus of the cell or the atom itself to change the gene expression. And based on intention, I can either replicate or inverse the cell. And there are other things I discovered that I was able to do in working with someone is kind of implanting adamantine particles of creator light into the cell itself for activation to plant new memory seed atoms of love and light and energy into the cell to elevate the vibration. Because everything, as we know, well, not everyone knows, but it's all vibration and energy. And I'm very humbled by being able to articulate these modalities for people. And it's been impactful in reversing cancer, dementia, autism, other, issues that people struggle with. And it's really the key to healing. It's, a lot of people are discovering this now, quantum entanglement. But may I say that the root or the engine of the modality, and really all modalities when we holistically approach, is love. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. So, and then alchemizing the energy that you're clearing and pulling out of someone, or transmuting. So when I'm working with someone, the modality itself kind of takes over. I know what I'm doing, and I'm guided by source to articulate, but I'm really resonating and vibrating in unconditional love for that person while I'm working on them. I'm really not thinking of anything else but channeling, so to speak, bringing in that creator light, those light codes, those downloads of love and light and compassion and benevolence to that person. And the more I began to realize how important that was to the modality, the more I began to focus on those energies, the greater results I got with that person. It seemed to be more permanent. It had an impact.